Hello, Facebook Live. It's Melissa from Aim and Melanoma. Tonight we're going to talk about tanning, specifically tanning beds. I decided that this was a really important topic because, it's the end of summer, and unfortunately, in my experience as a adolescent and young adult, this was kind of when people started tanning to try to preserve their summer glow and to feel better about themselves because it's winter and it's getting cooler. But I felt like this was a really important topic because it's actually one of the most preventable things that you can avoid that helps reduce your risk of developing a melanoma. A lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight are going to be focused on prevention more than anything. Most people that already have a melanoma know that they need to stay far, far away from tanning beds. But my hope was not only could this be sort of a public service announcement for families with younger kids, especially daughters, but also if you know someone who is in their teens and 20s that, maybe has used tanning beds or might use tanning beds, that maybe we could educate them a little bit about why not to do that. Unfortunately, and part of the reason why I labeled this Dear My 20-year-old Self is because, when I was 20, I used tanning beds. I'm not proud of that fact, but I did it. So I just wanted to come on here and kind of talk about why tanning beds are bad, offer some alternatives, and kind of educate people about sunburns, especially why tanning beds are not as safe as they claim to be. First of all, tanning bed industry is a huge industry. There's over 25,000 tanning bed businesses over the United States, which is astounding to me. There were some statistics. I kind of did a lot of digging about stats, and 10% of the American public still uses tanning beds now. And this is with all of the education and with all of the, videos that are out there warning against it. And so that equates to about over 30 million people that are using tanning beds every year. Using a tanning bed one time increases your risk of melanoma by double. What? That's insane to me. When I read that, I was like, oh dear. If you use a tanning bed more than 10 times, it increases your risk of melanoma by, let me see, what did it say? By 35% on top of the already doubling your risk. If you use it for 1 year, it increases your risk of melanoma by 61%. So the World Health Organization actually categorized tanning beds as a human carcinogen. That helped legislation because, there are a lot of states that are passing laws to prevent minors from using tanning beds, which I think is an extraordinarily important thing. But also it makes it a little more difficult for adults in some states as well to tan. They're putting a lot more regulations on the types of tanning beds and things that they can put in, but people don't follow those rules apparently. 82% of people when surveyed had sunburns from tanning beds, even though they have claims that, you won't burn, that getting a base tan is important. So we're going to talk about a little bit about those myths as well. I wanted to kind of look at this from both ends. The pros and cons of using tanning beds. The pros, it is known to improve mood. UV exposure actually releases endorphins, which can help you feel better. The bad thing about that is that you can actually become addicted to tanning beds. And the way that happens is both a physical and a psychological dependence. It's psychological because it releases endorphins and makes you feel good about yourself. And physical dependence, they actually did this really cool study where they showed that frequent tanners, they took, a handful of frequent tanners and they exposed them to both like light boxes that didn't have UV exposure. They basically just were like warm and had light bulbs in them. And then they had UV beds. And almost every single person that was a frequent tanner preferred the beds that were blinded that UV exposed them versus the ones that didn't. So like tan addiction is a real thing. There was a term that was out a few years ago called tanorexic. That's a real thing. So it does improve mood, but you can become addicted. These people actually have other addictive tendencies towards drugs and alcohol and things like that. So you can become addicted to tanning. One of the other pros that is put out there is that it helps with vitamin D synthesis. Well, you don't need that much sun to produce vitamin D synthesis. Actually, between 10 and 15 minutes of moderate sun, which is like early morning sun or even late afternoon sun when you're not trying to get sunburned, is enough to create vitamin D synthesis. So you do not need to spend hours in the sun to produce vitamin D. Also, diets and supplements regularly make enough vitamin D to make up for the lack of that. People say it's warm, so I won't even talk about that, because honestly, you can get warm from putting on a blanket or go outside in the morning and drink your coffee when it's, a nice day outside. That's not a pro. People will say that tanning beds are used for phototherapy, and actually that's not true. The beds that they use to treat things like psoriasis and mood affective disorder don't have UV light. They use a special kind of UVB light for psoriasis that actually, and UVA that doesn't penetrate the skin the way that regular wavelengths of UVA and UVB do. So that's an important thing. Cons. So the truth about tanning: it can cause cataracts. It can cause wrinkles, and we'll talk a little more about that in a second. It promotes premature skin aging. It can actually cause an allergy to the skin. You can become photoallergic in a tanning bed. It actually causes immunosuppression. So when you get exposed chronically to UV rays, and especially if you get sunburn, it actually lowers your immune system's response, which obviously is why it allows that DNA damage that the UV causes to not be repaired, which is what causes skin cancers. Obviously, it can cause sunburns, and all three types of skin cancer, which is kind of a good segue into like, what does this actually cause? Hi, Lily. How are you? So we need to talk, I guess, back up and talk about like, why are tanning beds bad? Why do they cause wrinkles and premature aging and skin cancer? So there's three types of UV exposure, and I talked a little bit about this whenever I did the lecture or the Facebook Live on sunscreens. But to back up, so there's UVA, UVB, and UVC. UVC is pretty much blocked by clouds, so we don't have to worry about that too much. And in outdoor tanning, you get exposed to UVA and UVB because you do. Some tanning beds will say, we only use UVA light because you don't get burned. Well, that's terrible, because yes, UVB causes sunburns. That's the primary wavelength that causes the burn part of the skin. It penetrates only like the epidermis, the part of your skin that you can see, and it's mostly responsible for sunburns. UVB exposure more likely causes squamous cells and basal cells, which by and large are not good either. But UVA light actually penetrates down into the deeper part of the epidermis and into the dermis, which is the fleshy part of your skin. And that's where the blood vessels live. That's where your lymph nodes live. That's where the keratinocytes grow. And the junction between those two places, the dermis and the epidermis, is where the melanocytes live. So when your skin gets exposed to sun, whether it be artificial from a tanning bed or natural light from being outside without sunscreen, it actually causes two types of tanning. The first type is an immediate tan, and that actually is where the melanocytes all kind of oxidize, and so they change color to help protect your skin from the sun. So that immediate sun change or skin change that you get when you go outside is actually sun damage. It's your body's way of being like, stop this is not okay. Or like if you had been tanning and you come out of the tanning bed and you're kind of like red and sort of tannish, that's actually from your melanocytes being damaged and screaming for help. And then the second form of tanning is actually something that happens like between 24 and 48 hours later, where your body actually produces more melanocytes to help make up for the fact that the other ones are damaged, and also to further protect your skin. And this holds true for any kind of malignancy, when you ask a certain cell to develop really fast to replace something, that's when mistakes happen. It's like when I Love Lucy was trying to use the conveyor belt and she couldn't put the chocolates down fast enough. She's shoving them in her mouth and all that stuff. Mistakes happen when you're trying to go too fast. So when melanocytes are made at that kind of speed, oftentimes mistakes in the DNA are made, and that's where skin cancers come from. So you just had a biology lesson, right? Like that. So the reason that that's important is that these UVA rays that get down into the skin, although they don't burn you, because most of that comes from UVB, they're actually doing more damage. So in addition to the DNA damage that they're causing, they're also damaging blood vessels, which is why, you get cherryangiomas and you get like an overall reddening of the skin with chronic sun exposure. It actually destroys the elasticity of the skin because that's where all of the like moisture in the skin lies. And so wrinkles form more quickly. The other thing that happens when you get exposed to that UVA light is that it actually almost microwaves the skin. Because let's remember, UV rays are radiation. So you're radiating your skin. And when that happens, it actually almost like you make more keratin because you're trying to protect, like it's like almost like a shell. And when that happens, that's where those like age spots come from. And your skin, gets hard and it loses its turgor, which is like the puffiness, and just overall ruins your skin. So premature aging is something that is for sure accelerated by the sun and by tanning beds. One of the most important things that, I want to talk about is that especially targeting high school kids and kids in their early to late 20s, is that if you get more than like 5 sunburns in your childhood, you have a 2-fold greater risk of developing melanoma. So, we want to definitely protect our kids, our friends, our strangers in elementary school, middle school, high school. There is actually some statistic that I read that like the youngest documented person that was using a tanning bed was 9. So, we want to be really careful. One of the other myths that is out there is that you get a base tan when you go to the beach so you don't get burned. It's not true for a lot of reasons. One is that you only can make so many melanocytes at a time. So even though your skin is tan, for whatever reason that is, it actually doesn't protect you from more DNA damage that is caused. So even though you might not burn because that protective shell is over top with the tan, it's still doing damage DNA wise. So it's kind of a misnomer in that respect because you're not actually protecting your skin. The other thing is that there's this whole 20 minutes in a tanning bed, I'm spending 5 hours laying out at the beach, at least I'm not doing that. Unfortunately, the tanning beds are stronger than the sun. It's like laying directly on the sun. One of the interesting statistics is that when you go in a tanning bed, you actually get 4 times the amount of sun of UVA exposure and 2 times the amount of UVB exposure if the bed does have both A and B wavelengths than regular sun, like the noonday regular sun, the hottest sun there is. And the express beds, instead of a 20-minute maximum bed, it's a 10-minute maximum bed. So the bulbs are stronger. It's actually 10 to 15 times more UV exposure than the noonday sun. So even though it might seem like a good idea, it would be like the equivalent of spending 20 minutes in the tanning bed is like spending 4 hours in noon sun without protection. So, people are 2.5 times more likely to develop a squamous cell by using tanning beds. They're 1.5 more likely to develop basal cells from using tanning beds. So I think I can probably get off my soapbox at this point because everyone now probably knows that I feel like tanning beds are not good. I will tell you that I use them. I wish that I would have known this when I was younger. I wish that someone would have told me. So Tiffany, when you say you wish you could explain this to people, you can. Send them this video. There's a video that circulated on the internet a couple years ago. It's called like Dear 16-Year-Old Me. And it was put out by some folks in Canada. And it's this series of videos that like talk about, it's like patients and family members and doctors that are like, Dear 16-year-old me, I don't use tanning beds. And it goes through this like big story about like the people you leave behind and how this is a preventable thing. And I can't watch it without crying. Like I watched it before I came on to be able to address the things that are in it, and I got teary-eyed. Like I can't watch it. Like the things that happen, you know, as an adolescent really do affect you forever. One of the people said, you know, your skin is like an elephant; it never forgets, and that's very true. It takes 10 to 15 years sometimes for the DNA damage that happened from the sun to manifest itself. So, you know, I know that this is not a forum to express personal opinions, so I've tried to fill this with as many facts as possible, but I wish somebody would have told me when I was 15 years old to not use tanning beds. So spread the word, share the video, definitely tell your friends. So it's an important thing. So what can we do as an alternative? So I was in a wedding over the weekend, and well, not in a wedding, at a wedding over the weekend, and I wanted to not have glow in the dark legs. And because I will not go in a tanning bed and I can't wear pantyhose, I use self-tanners. So self-tanners have a chemical in it called dihydroxyacetone, or DHA. And it actually is a chemical that actually stains the dead skin that's on your cells, like that are on the surface of your skin. It's actually approved by the FDA for that use, for use on the skin. There were some warnings not to use spray tans. And the reason for that is there's not a lot of data to say like what happens if you inhale that, or if it gets like in your eye or in your mouth or something like that. So safety wise, FDA approves skin use, but not use on as a spray tan. It doesn't protect you from the sun. That's one thing you definitely have to know, even though you have color. Those are not melanocytes, so they're not falsely protecting you. It lasts for like a couple days to a few weeks. So it's definitely something that will last for a while. There are lots of really good formulations now. They used to like turn you orange and streak and stuff like that. I was going to show you how to apply self-tanner, but I was like, that's another video altogether. But it, you know, most of the time if you use a foam and a mitt and you rub it evenly, it usually has an immediate color so you can tell where you're spreading it. So like the self-tanners are actually really helpful. They have also like Jergens, probably getting in trouble for branding, but they have lotions that contain self-tanner in them too that are way more gradual if you really need that, you know, summery glow to your skin. So definitely alternatives. The other thing that I looked at and came across whenever I was researching this was these pills that apparently increase melanin production without UV exposure. Those aren't safe. Don't use them. There was no data to actually support that they're safe. And also, again, if you're stimulating melanocyte growth artificially or with the sun, it actually also has the same kind of risk because you're creating a production of something that doesn't do that normally. So again, stay away from pills that say that they'll make you tan because there isn't actually any scientific data to support that. So self-tanners are your friend. I see all of my little friends on here. Cindy, I'm sorry that you got your melanoma in situ, and I see Jeff with his stage 3. That's awful. And I see some of my friends from where I work. It's nice to see you guys. I also wanted to talk, I'm trying to look at my notes real fast. Back to the whole like preventable thing, and then we're going to sign off if nobody has any questions, is that there was a statistic that said that 215,000 people a year develop a melanoma from a tanning bed. Like it's they can like establish a direct relationship, and the exact same number of people by like give or take 20,000, which when you're looking at 200,000, that's not a lot of people, they actually have lung cancer from smoking. So if there's all this legislation against using of cigarettes and lung cancer, there also needs to be legislation with tanning beds and skin cancer. So I'll just leave it at that. But it's really nice to be able to get on here and kind of educate people. Please share this video to anyone that you know that might think about using a tanning bed or has younger kids. I'm happy to answer any kind of questions on the 1884 number, or there's a link on our website at aimandmelanoma.org if you have questions about any of the things we talked about tonight or anything more about tanning beds or how I can help. I'm always available. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. See you again.